Congratulations, you have submitted your listing to Zillow and your brand new for sale sign is in your front yard. So now what? In this video, I'm going to talk to you about expectations. We will cover the number and types of calls you may receive, calls about setting up showings and the number of showings you will have, the types of offers you will receive, and finally, how seasonality plays a role in your listing. One of the first things you may have noticed when you click submit on Zillow was the sound of crickets. Unfortunately, your home for sale is not very exciting to anyone but yourself. But that's okay. Selling your home is a numbers game. Very few sellers are going to list their house and sell it right away. It happens, but don't expect it. It's okay to be glad when this happens though. So how many calls should you receive? The numbers will vary greatly based on many different circumstances. This can include the time of year, the price of your house, the location of your home, and how well you did on the pictures in your listing. Most of your phone calls are going to happen once you list your house, within the first couple of weeks. After that, expect the calls to level off, and at this point, expect about 1 call a week. You will hit points where you don't receive any calls for maybe 2-3 weeks at a time. If you go more than 3 weeks without any calls, it's time to consider doing some extra marketing. As soon as you list your house for sale, you're going to get a flood of phone calls, many from the wrong people. Based on my interviews, the level and the mix of calls is all over the place. Some reported a couple calls from the undesirables and up to 40 calls throughout the whole process. Don't fret about this though. As long as you know how to handle each call, this will only be a minor annoyance. I want to stop here and point out something very important. The more information you put online about your home, the fewer phone calls you will get. This is a good thing. You only want calls from interested buyers who can afford and want to buy your home. If you do a great job of putting information online, you will eliminate calls and showings from individuals who are not going to make you an offer. In this next section, I'm going to introduce you to some of the callers you will encounter. I will give you the questions you need to ask to figure out what type of person with whom you're speaking. When you are speaking with a buyer, make sure to keep the flow of the conversation natural. Start with, "How may I help you?" The answer to this question will usually let you know the type of caller who's calling. Listen closely. If you're still unsure, continue with these questions. Do you intend to get a real estate agent? Agents at this point should identify themselves. Renters and tire kickers will not have a real estate agent and will try to dance around this question. Investors typically use an agent to buy a house, but then sell it on their own. However, they will do most of the legwork themselves. They include the agent in the buy so that the agent can get the commission as a payback for helping them find properties to invest in. Some legitimate buyers will want to buy the house without an agent to save money, and they will let you know this. The next question is, do you have a pre-qualification letter from a mortgage company? Or if you're paying cash, do you have a bank statement you can send me to confirm that you have the funds? Tell the buyer that you would be happy to show the house once they have a qualification letter from or the cash in the bank. Renters and tire kickers will not have this letter. If someone says he is selling his house and will use the proceeds from his house to pay for yours in cash, go with your gut here. You have the right to ask for a copy of their mortgage payoff letter to ensure that their asking price will pay off their house and provide them with ample funds to purchase your house. The next question is, are you looking to buy the house to move into, or are you going to rent or resell the house? If there's any doubts left, this should flush out your investors. Once you find out that you have a real estate agent on the line who wants your business, follow these suggestions. Tell the agent that you have a friend or family member who is a real estate agent, and if you decide to list with an agent, you've promised to use that person. This will discourage them from pursuing your business. If you don't want to hear from the agent again, ask for his or her name and then ask to be put on their do not call list. Once you do this, they can be fined for calling you again. Many agents will want to, quote, come see your house so they can tell other agents about it. Warning, this is a ploy to continue pitching their services to you. Insist that they bring a qualified buyer, proven by a pre-qualification letter. An agent has no incentive to tell another agent about your house because they will not get the commission for doing so. Having a few agents come by your house and conducting a market analysis for you is a good thing, Of course, they're going to try to get your listing. However, you can get a qualified opinion on your home and price by doing this. Just make sure that the agent is a full-time agent. Sometimes you will run into investors who are wanting a deal. It's hard to go anywhere these days without seeing a sign telling you that someone will buy your house. My wife will buy your house, or my dog will buy your house. Just kidding about the dog, but you get the picture. This is because there are a lot of investors out there looking for a lot of good deals. While these investors are buyers, they're usually a waste of your time if you know what you're doing. Follow these suggestions when you encounter an investor. Once you learn the person on the phone is an investor, tell them that you're not willing to entertain any offers below 90% of your asking price. A typical investor is usually looking to get a house for about 70% or less of the amount that they can get for reselling it. If they agree to that, consider showing them your house. Investors are usually one of the first people to call, so that gives you a chance to practice showing your house. Also, listen carefully to what they have to say. The investor's feedback will be nitpicky because they're wanting to drive down the price, so take it with a grain of salt. But listen closely. He or she may point out some things about your house which you were not aware. Other callers may be renters. This is a new one for me because it just started popping up in my last round of interviews. Maybe that's because in some places rentals are in high demand, or it could have just been the time of year. Regardless, think long and hard about whether or not you want to rent your house or sell it. The vast majority of you are going to want to sell it, so if you decide that renting is desirable, your real estate attorney can help you with that paperwork as well. The best way to deter renters from calling you is to add this line in your listing write-up. Will not consider offers for rent or rent to own. All buyers must be pre-qualified for a mortgage or have a bank statement showing the money is in the bank. The most perplexing type of call to me is the tire kickers. I guess I just wonder who has that kind of time. Tire kickers can be some of the toughest to identify and the biggest waste of your time. Most sellers won't want to turn away any potential buyers. Let's face it, if you're getting lots of activity, lots of phone calls and showings, you feel good about your home. Try to fight this urge. You are going to be happier in the end if you stick to your guns and weed out the undesirables. To handle tire kickers, make sure that you ask all the questions above, and under no circumstances allow someone to see your home without a pre-approval letter or a copy of their bank statement confirming the funds are available. Make sure to get this ahead of time or cancel the showing. Now, the cream of the crop is an interested, qualified buyer without a real estate agent. When you get a live actual buyer on the line, you need to deliver your A game. Make sure that you return all calls within an hour. When buyers call you, they're excited. You don't want to lose this excitement. Return calls promptly to ensure that they see your home before they settle for another. Be flexible. Selling a home is stressful, and so is buying one. This is a big decision for your buyer, so you want to be as flexible as possible as long as you keep the deal moving forward. Be willing to do things like allowing the buyer to come over and see the house at the last minute, or to answer questions that you feel you've already answered, or consider their request during the negotiation. Remember, these buyers are looking at 10 or more homes, and it can sometimes get confusing. Ask yourself, will this get me closer to making a deal? If the answer is yes, then try to do what they're requesting. Be organized. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you went into a store that was a mess? Did you buy anything? You probably bought nothing or a lot less than you would have in a nice, neat store. This advice extends to the look of your house and how you approach the deal. Have a questionnaire from the real estate attorney ready and make sure that you get all the answers in one conversation. Have a packet of information ready for the buyer that includes all the pertinent documents. In addition to buyers on the phone, you will get real estate agents who represent a particular interested buyer. Most buyers use real estate agents when purchasing a house. Why? They don't have to pay the buyer's commission. They get free advice on your dime. But that's okay. You're still going to save the 3% commission that you would have paid an agent to represent you. Remember that the agent is a go-between. Outside of advising you, there's not much heavy lifting that an agent does besides relaying the buyer's wants and desires to the seller. Keep this in mind. It's likely that any questions or requests that are made by the agent came from the buyer. Make sure to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask any type of question to the buyer's agent. You can ask them things about the buyer. For example, why are they moving? Do they have kids? What don't they like about the house? You can ask them about the process. Now, your best advisor is going to be your real estate attorney, but you can ask the buyer's agents questions too. For example, what's the difference between a VA loan and a regular loan? You can ask the agents to do tasks for you. For example, if the buyer calls you and wants to come by and take measurements, ask the agents to meet the buyer at the house if you cannot be around. All right, that's enough about the types of callers that you're going to receive. Let's talk about the number of showings you'll get. So how many showings will you get? Just like with the number of calls, the number of showings will vary. You're going to receive calls from people who ask you questions and then just say thank you and hang up. They don't request a showing. In my personal experience and talking to other sellers, this is going to happen more often than not. Expect to get a showing about 1 out of 3 calls. If you show your house more than 10 times and do not get an offer, either one of 3 things are wrong. First, you may not be screening buyers to make sure that they can afford your house. By screening your buyers, you're going to eliminate many of your showings, and this is a good thing. Why on earth would you want to waste your time with people who can't afford your house? If you're not screening your buyers and asking them for the pre-qualification letter or a copy of their bank statement, this rule of 10 is out the door. Second, your house may be priced too high. In short, buyers are coming by to look at your house to see if it's, quote, worth it. In their mind, the resounding answer is no once they leave. If you don't use one of the approaches that we teach, I strongly consider getting an appraisal before wasting any more time showing your home to these buyers. Just like many sellers don't like to negotiate, many buyers don't like to negotiate either. They would rather walk away from your home rather than try to negotiate a large price drop. Lastly, your house may not show well. If buyers are walking into a messy house or a cramped home, they may be turned off. Just think about all the shows on HGTV. The buyers complain about things like wall color, the type of curtains in a room, or even a ceiling fan. Remember, if you want to sell your home quickly and for top dollar, you need to have your home in better shape than any of your competition. If you feel that you suffer from your home not showing well, consider hiring a home stager to come and do a consultation. Next, let's talk about the types of offers you will receive. I'm going to go through each type of offer and talk about the pros and cons of each. These are in no particular order. An offer contingent on the sale of their home. This is generally a bad idea because the buyer wants you to wait until they sell their home before they buy yours. While this is an unfortunate situation that many buyers are in, it's not ideal for you, and I recommend you avoid it. The advantage is that you get an offer. The disadvantage is you have no control over the buyer and what they're going to do to sell their house. Let's face it, a buyer could just be nuts. Real estate friends of mine have told me about situations where they had paid $80 to have something fixed to ensure the deal did not fall through. Additionally, a buyer for my mom's house was delayed over 6 weeks because a mortgage wasn't taken off their house back in the 1980s when they refinanced it. There are too many unknowns for you to risk taking your house off the market when you have an offer on it. An offer to buy sight unseen. This happened to me whenever I sold my first house. An out-of-town buyer liked all the information I had on Zillow, including the disclosures and the floor layouts, and they wanted to make an offer before coming to see the house. Again, the positive here is that you have an offer on the home. However, sales contracts are written in a way that makes it easy for a buyer to back out. So if the buyer comes and looks at your home after they sign the sales contract, it's easy for them to find something they don't like about the home and legitimately back out of the sales contract. I recommend against taking any offer sight unseen. The buyer wants you to finance all or part of the mortgage. A lot of times these are called land contracts or contracts for deed. They can go by many other names as well. I've seen this happen more in smaller towns and rural areas than in larger cities and suburbs. I'm a big fan of the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Rich Dad states that this is a great deal because if the buyer doesn't pay the monthly payments, you get your home back and you can sell it again. In the end, though, you're going to need to decide if you need the cash now. If you need the cash to pay off your mortgage, you will not be able to accept a deal like this. Your mortgage company won't let you transfer the deed and keep the mortgage on the house. Now, the buyer may want to pay for a big chunk of the house with cash and then have you lend him the rest of the money for the home. That chunk of money that the buyer is willing to pay at closing needs to be enough to cover your mortgage. The big negative here is that you don't walk away with a lot of cash in your pocket to go put down on a down payment on a new house. Most buyers will ask up front if you're willing to do this. However, make sure that you're asking for a pre-qualification letter or bank statement to weed out these buyers. Buyers wanting to rent. We will probably see interest rates going up shortly, which will drive more people to rent than buy. In many cases, rental houses go very quickly, and you may have renters calling to ask you if you'd be willing to rent your house. This is another situation that if you don't need the money, it could be a viable option for you. However, if you need the money, you probably want to skip this. If you get a lot of calls about renters, you can always update your Zillow listing to indicate that you're not willing to rent the house. A buyer who is willing to pay cash. Although I'm not lucky enough to be in this position yet, many buyers are. These buyers often want to move very quickly. They are in a hurry, especially when they've sold their home and need to move out before closing. In these cases, the buyer will not have to go through a lot of the requirements that a mortgage buyer would have to go through. For example, they do not have to get an appraisal completed. This enables them to move much more quickly. Buyers with an FHA or VA loan. There are other federally subsidized loans out there that can be wrapped into this grouping as well. I just don't know them all. Anytime the government's involved, there are much higher standards that will be required for closing. For example, one seller told me that they had to have a leaky faucet fixed before closing because the buyer was getting an FHA loan. The appraisals or inspections for these types of loans are very stringent. These buyers are good buyers, and there's nothing wrong with these buyers or their credit. However, it just may take a little bit longer for the closing, and you may need to do a little bit more of the small repairs. Buyers with a conventional loan. This is what we are all used to, and they're the most common. A buyer takes out a loan and puts anywhere from 5 to 20% down. You go through the traditional closing process that will take about 60 days, and it may require a few small repairs. Unless you need to sell very, very quickly, there's nothing wrong with these types of loans. Buyers without a real estate agent. These are the best because both you and the buyer will be able to save money. However, you may need to get a little bit more involved in the transaction to help move things along. This may take a little bit more of your time, but you will have a much larger reward in the end. Lastly, offers with contingencies or concessions. When it's a buyer's market, and it almost always is these days, buyers will demand more from the sellers. These types of concessions can include paying closing costs, making repairs, providing cash at closing so the buyer can make repairs, or a whole host of other things. Keep in mind what your rock bottom price is and make sure that these concessions do not eat into that. Those are the types of offers that I've come across in my personal experience and in interviewing sellers. If I hear about other types of offers in the future, I'll add them to this transcript below and indicate that it's been updated. If you see that the transcript has been updated, go ahead and check the offer section for updates. Lastly, let's talk about seasonality. In real estate, the peak time is late spring and over the summer. People do not like to move whenever the kids are in school, so they try to time the selling of their home to coincide with summer. I never recommend waiting to put your house on the market until the peak times, because there's always many buyers in every season of the year. If you wait to put your house on the market, you're going to miss some of those potential buyers. Outside of late spring and summer, the other seasons are all combined into one. They are much slower than spring and summer, and you will see less traffic. However, and this is important, don't be afraid to list your home during the off-season. Why? Buyers who are looking for homes in the off-season are typically very serious buyers and are ready to make a move. They will be pressured by something that's causing them to move. This could be a job change, a change in family situation, or something else that's prompting them to move. I know this was a long session, and I really appreciate you sticking with me. It's very important to set expectations correctly for the for sale by owner process. If your expectations are wrong, you are very, very likely to give up and hire a real estate agent. Because of that, I want you to watch this video anytime you get stuck and are thinking about giving up.